perhaps we should make a start. I'm very pleased today that we've got Yujia Han, a research fellow from Edinburgh University, who's been working for a while now on social network analysis. Yeah, that's her. So, I think social network analysis is getting more and more popular, and it's something that would be very, very relevant to us at GSBL in a number of ways. And hopefully we're going to learn a great deal more about it. Well, no, not hopefully. We will learn a great deal more about it in the next few minutes. So I'm going to switch my camera off now, and I'm handing over to you, Yujia.
Right. Thank you very much, Nigel, and thank you for inviting me to this chance to share my research. I'm going to apologize first about the siren, perhaps because I live in the city centre in Edinburgh and it happens all the time. I'll just share my slides with you so you can see the pictures, the slides. Great.
That's perfect. We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So my name is Yujia Han. I'm a research fellow at the University of Edinburgh. And this project is what I've been working for the past 1 year and a half. So this is a project I work with Thea Wade in School of Social and Political Science. And this is a research funded by Centre for Research into Energy Demand Solutions and UKRI. And this is a project about mapping supply chains for building retrofit. I'm going to explain what is building retrofit later, but the focus here is we are using social network perspective to look at how to map a group of organizations and their relationship. So here's a content. So I'm going to go through some of the research background, what we wanted to achieve in the beginning, and the rationale for adopting social network theory, how we collected data, and some of the data, some of the findings of this project, and what are the future steps we're planning to take. So because this is the very first project I do for empirical work for social network analysis, so it would be great to have your opinions on the part that you would like me to hear more about, to explain more about, and to clarify more about. And just there's no stupid questions at all. It's the first project of empirical project I've done so far. Right, so the background. So just now we talk about building retrofit. So what is building retrofit? So the traditional method of retrofitting or renovating a building for energy efficiency purpose is to having some basic installations. It's an incremental approach of installation of individual heat pumps or installations by multiple contractors on site at different times. And the measures to install are quite incremental. So the installers will come to the building and install different things without necessarily knowing the net zero performance for the entire building. And this is the approach that we are more familiar of, because most of us have experience having the installers come into the building and do multiple work on site. But recent years, there is a more innovative approach called whole house retrofit. So it involves pre-planning of all the necessary approaches to achieve net zero. So instead of doing multiple things at without planning the whole performance. It typically apply prefabricated facades, PV panels, a smart heating and ventilation to improve the overall thermal efficiency. And it's also usually performed by a single contractor. So whole house retrofit is understand as a new and innovative way to increase energy efficiency at the scale and speed needed to achieve net zero targets. Especially in the UK, there are many old buildings that is not necessarily energy efficient, and in order to achieve the net zero target, it has to be done with increased speed and scale. But so far, how the supply chain operates in both approaches, what are the actors involved, the structure of them, their layout and dynamics have not been covered in the literature. And also we're conscious that it might be disruptive to the local market. We're not sure whether local tradespeople, the plumbers, electricians are positioned in supplying a new whole house retrofit project at all. And so we aim to understand a bit more of the supply chain configurations of these two types of retrofitting projects. So we want to know how these two things differ. In terms of understanding the difference, we aim to understand what types of organizations are involved. Are they local, international companies? Are they small micro enterprises or large organizations? And what are the structural characteristics of these two types of supply network? The density, how cohesive are these two networks? And thirdly, is there any central players in these two types of networks? And to be able to answer these questions, we apply social network theoretical lens. And so this is called social network theory. It's theory and a set of tools to map relationship and network structures. So it basically treats people or organization as an actor, and the relationship that links between these actors as ties or relationships. And so basically you can visualize the structure of the social networks. So classic social network studies will use this lens and tool to investigate some very interesting questions. For example, why it is easier for someone to get a job offer, or how does rumor or a virus spread across a population, or how to detect influential actors in a criminal network. So previous studies in this area have found that social network analysis is really insightful in gaining more understanding of spontaneous human relationships. So which is quite active in the construction sector because of different layers of contractors and subcontractors, subcontractors. So there's different layers and it's hard to picture these actors and their relationships and the implications of the relationship to the performance of the whole network as a group. And so we apply this lens and we treat the organizations in these two networks as nodes, and the communications between organizations about retrofitting is the tie, and these tie can be about communications about planning, designing, or communications about on-site construction work. And so, as I said, there are two networks in this study. One is called whole house network, the innovative one, and one is single or multi-measure network, the more traditional one. And we applied this in a case study city in the UK. Yeah, it's a case study of energy efficiency social housing activities to distinguish social housing and private housing. Is the difference mainly is private housing, the homeowners is all individuals. It's difficult to track the retrofitting activities, whereas social housing, the homeowner is usually the local authority. And it's relatively easier to kind of track the activities because the homeowners, there's one homeowners, and it's organized projects in larger scale. So we implemented the study in 2 steps. So the first step was a semi-structured interviews with 9 key people in this area. So for doing this semi-structured interviews, we aim to understand more about the context of the study. For example, what are the recent projects going on, and what are the relevant tasks in a retrofitting projects, and specific terms. For example, the whole house and single measure retrofit is what we gain from the interviews. And secondly, because we wanted to implement survey to collect social network data, so we need to have someone as a seed to be knowledgeable and active and in contact with diverse type of clusters, to be able to from there to start spreading this service. So after this, we spent around 3-4 months time to have these interviews and to gain information, and also have some secondary desk-based study to search information online on the local authority websites, etc. And after we have completed this phase, we move on to the second phase, which is the interview-based survey, and we use the tool, the dedicated network analysis data collection tool called Network Canvas. It's a very powerful tool to collect social network data. And so we're basically trying to collect organization attributes and the task involved, and whether the organization we are collecting social network data is from whole house or single measure projects. And we will ask people to, at the end of the survey, to nominate other network members, so that this survey will keep going. It's more like a snowball sampling. So keep going on until there is no new nominees until there is no new nominees. And also we also asked the participant to give us the communication frequencies of between them and the nominated network members. Just to give you some screenshot of how we collected data using Network Canvas. So this page, we tried to collect the organization attributes about organization type, when was the organization established, length in the building retrofit sector, and the size of the organization, and the service scale of organizations. And once that page was completed, we asked the participant to click whole house projects. Was it whole house project they were involved, and giving the specific project names. This question, so we did not specify a project network, but instead types of project network, because from the first phase of the interview, we understand that the project names can be really messy. So for some contractors, the project name is called A, but for the other subcontractors, they would understand it in there are multiple synonyms of one project names. So yeah, it can be confusing for the participants. So we make it more like an example. So this is a whole house project, and this is a single multi-measure project. So it's multiple choice, because one contractor or one organization can involve in different projects, different types of approaches. So we allow that option to be ticked. And after, so for example, if one, sorry, that was, so if organization ticked whole house project, I think it's better to have this laser pen on so you'll be able to see. Yeah. Okay. So if the contractor ticked this box, so this will appear, this box will appear. So types of work undertaken in whole house projects. So here are the 7 types of work, so or the types of communication we have identified from the interview. So we will ask a participant to choose which work were they involved. Was it defining project outcomes, understanding the building risk, or the design work, determining sources of technology and material supply, physical installation on site, commissioning and handover to residents, and finally monitoring the performance in use. So it's also a multiple choice, and if 1 or 2 was ticked, then the rest, then it gives, it leads you to another page, which is asking, if you ticked on task 1, defining project and outcome, did you perform this task alone? Or was there any other organization that you work with to perform this task? So here, this question, we're trying to identify if there is any extra node that this participant is connecting to in order to complete this task. And if this, okay, and then if this was, so if this was ticked, then we will ask the participant at the end of the survey to, so here you will see different names of the, so different names identified by the participant, and I will ask the participant to drag and drop into different boxes to identify the frequency of communication. So that's the data collection part. So in terms of the results, so after we collected all the data, we have information about the nodes, about the links, about the types of communication. Is it whole house or single measure network, and the communication frequency, and actually the direction of connections. We are able to visualize the structure, or to map this supply structure, a supply network. So there are 25 surveys completed in total, and we have combined these 2 networks in one picture. And in total, there are 58 nodes, meaning there are 58 organizations. There are 274 connections. And so the pink identifies the communications about whole house projects, and green links represents the single communications about single measure projects. And the edge, the whites of the tie represents the frequency of communications, of emails, phone calls, or face-to-face communications. And the wider it is, the stronger the more frequent that communication is. And so you can see also the nodes are of different sizes, and we use this to represent how frequent a node is sitting in between otherwise unconnected nodes, or in other words, if 3 is bridging between 40 to 10, then 3 is a bridging node. So we use the size to identify how important, in the sense that they are connecting other people, other organizations. So we can also see that there are several important organizations in the middle. For example, because of we wanted to protect the for GDPR reasons, we want to protect the identity of the organizations. So we use numbers, but I can talk you through who are they in general. So 1 and 12 are local authorities. They are quite central. 43, 3, and 10, they are private organizations. And we can also see that, well, there are quite a lot of overlaps. For example, 1 and 12, 43 are sitting both in whole house and single measure network. So we wanted to separate them. So yeah, in order to separating them and analyze in more in a structured way, we have two research questions. One is about how are different types of organizations positioned in the two networks. In terms of positioning, we wanted to understand how different organizations are performing different tasks. So here is the a very colorful table. And so we wanted to understand the distribution of organization size in whole house and single measure. So organization size, because of there are 5 organization attributes, and for the purpose of this presentation, I'm only going to present organization size, but these can be, we've analyzed all of them basically. So in terms of organization size, all you need to see, I think the highlighted part is for the whole house network. We see that there are more micro enterprises involved across all of the tasks. So these are task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So micro enterprises are involved in all of the tasks compared to single multi-measure retrofit. And in terms of large enterprises, there are more green boxes in the single measure projects. That's one finding. And so for whole house network, we also try to visualize these tasks and also the organization size in one picture. So the different organization size, we use different node shape to represent them, and also different task in different color, ties color. So from this map, we can see that there are there are quite a lot of several central organizations, but there are still quite a large proportion of peripheral organizations, and their distribution of different node shapes in peripheral organizations. Some of them are circles, some of them are rectangular, pentagon, triangles. So it's quite diverse. We can't really see much pattern here. In terms of the single measure network, there are still some central nodes in the middle, but it seems that there are less peripheral organizations. And so we still couldn't see much pattern here because it's quite a lot of colors and it's quite clustered. So we try to just visualize the task. So because all of the task was based on different project phases. So we try to visualize, so the design work. So we filtered all the other communications out and only leave the communications about design work on the 2 maps. So the left-hand side is whole house and the right side is single measure. So from here, we can see quite a lot of organizations are involved in completing this task, but seems mostly centered are the important organizations in the middle. Determining sources of technology and material supply. There are less organizations involved. and commissioning handover, there are even less nodes, and there are less communications, and we can see a very clear distribution in the middle. Monitoring performance and use, it's also less organizations and very clear indication that these are performed by the central organizations in the middle. Here is an interesting part, because now we can see that the physical installation on site seems to be mostly completed by the peripheral organizations on the edges, and less communications in the middle. And so that was the finding of different tasks. It was just based on visualizations, and there was less, we can't really say something is really significant. So we wanted to have some quantitative analysis in terms of central or peripheral. So we wanted to use one of the SNA, fundamental SNA metrics, which is called centrality, to understand whether one node is really central or really peripheral. And because if we can correlate between the central, if someone is really central and we think that central organizations are performing, for example, the monitoring and procurement task, then we can maybe see some correlation between that. So to do that, I need to introduce you some of the centrality measures. So node centrality measure in SNA is a measure of power, prestige, and social capital. So a node with better centrality scores indicates the possession of a more advantageous position in the network. And in order to calculate that, we have in degree centrality, so for example, X is in the middle and Y is in the edge. And the in degree centrality of X is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 other nodes pointing towards X. So the in degree centrality of X is 5. And an out degree centrality is also 5, because it's X is giving this links directing to the others. And there are other centrality measures because in degree and out degree centrality depends on the context. It doesn't necessarily meaning that this organization is important, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm only going to introduce you degree centrality. So we, based on this measurement, we can calculate the degree, in degree, and out degree centrality of all the organizations. So degree centrality is basically how many nodes were connected, regardless of the direction. And so from here, we can see that the node number 3, which is a private, local private organization, and 1 and 12 are local authorities, 10, 43 are also private organizations are central, and 3 is a small, so here we can see 3, 12, and 1, they are having the biggest degree centrality, and 12 and 1 is quite expected because they are the local authority. They are initiating and coordinating these 2 types of projects. And so, but from here, we can also identify number 3, 10, and 43, which is private organizations, which is something we are not able to see from local authorities' websites, which is another interesting finding. And so we, as I mentioned earlier about the correlation, we wanted to make some tests. And so from here, because we see the pattern that these peripheral organizations seems to be performing these physical installation quality check on site. And we correlate this with the centrality scores of the peripheral organizations, and we can see a very clear correlation, a negative correlation between, and the p-value is less than 0.05, which is significant. So which means that these organizations that performing this task are more likely to have less centrality measures or degree centrality measures. They're likely to be peripheral. And so what that means is they have less connections in the network, and they have less exposure to task-related information, and they have less capacity to facilitate interactions with the others. And second part we also wanted to analyze about is how is the information exchange structured? Because just now we were only trying to understand the nodes, and now we wanted to understand more about the links between the nodes. So in order to do that, from SNA, a social network analysis perspective, there are two ways that is quite relevant for us. So one is we want to understand whether the structure is more cohesive or less cohesive. And secondly, we want to understand if there is any central actors. In terms of cohesiveness, we can use network cohesions concept from social network analysis. So it's a measure of connectivity and communication effectiveness. So on the left-hand side, it's a star-like structure, and we can see it's quite centralized compared to the right side, which is a pentagon. So it's more decentralized. And so from social network theory, it's understand that a more cohesive network indicate a faster and more efficient spread of information and knowledge. And so we calculated, oh yes, and there's also a way of measuring. So there are formal ways of measuring centralization of a network. And so we measured that, both of the networks, and found out that whole house network has pretty much higher centralization measurements. And we can see that whole house has a clumpier structure, and connections are being dominated by a few organizations. So it's more like a star shape. And the dominant organizations form the bigger size of the main cluster in the middle. And because of this network structure, we can conclude that whole house network has a more efficient diffusion of information. In terms of the central nodes, we think that brokerage was more relevant to this construction context, because as I explained before, the construction context has a lot of multiple contractors and subcontractors. So an organization that is able to gain information, novel information that is otherwise on or bridge otherwise unconnected actors are more beneficial to have access to novel information quickly. So in terms of brokerage, it's a measure of social roles, and there are different types of broker depending on what communities the three actors are situated in. So as I said, a broker is brokering otherwise unconnected actors. So A as broker is brokering between B and C. So if B wants to reach C, B needs to go through A to be able to reach C. So an interesting part here is we can actually look at how A, B, and C is situated in a community. For example, if A, B, and C is from the same company, then A is a coordinator between B and C. And if A is from a separate company between B and C, then A is an itinerant broker. And similarly, depending on where the community boundary is situated, we can have different types of broker roles of A. So we calculated the distribution of brokerage roles just to see, so we have the organization size as community to understand whether particular organizations is brokering between a small micro enterprises and large organization, for example. And here we can see that there are more brokerage or coordinator roles in whole house. Well, sorry, I need to go to the next slide to be able to show you. Yeah, so there are more liaison and actually no. So in whole house network, 3 and 12 are playing more brokerage roles, whereas in single measure network, the brokerage roles are more evenly distributed across different organizations. And there are some overlaps of the organizations across these two networks. So these are 12, 43, 10, 11, and 25. The 12, which is a local authority, is playing liaison and gatekeeper role only in the whole house project network, whereas it's playing a multiple brokerage role to coordinating between different types of different organization sizes in a single measure network. And 10, which is really interesting. 10 is a local authority as well, but 10 is playing the opposite function of these two networks. So 10 is playing multiple brokerage roles in whole house network, but is playing limited brokerage roles in quite focused brokerage roles in single measure network. And these 3, 43, 1, 25 as small private organizations are playing more brokerage roles in single measure network. Okay, so that's quite a lot of findings. I'm just making this summary for all the findings I had based on the presentation just now. And so in terms of the original question we asked was, how does these two types of network differ? And so first of all, I would like to say that this is the very first time social network analysis has been used for mapping retrofitting supply chains. There have been some studies in construction supply chains, but in terms of retrofitting supply chains for energy efficiency context, this is the very first time, and I'm proud of that. And secondly, we can see that there is some overlap between these two networks. We can see that whole house is a greater number of organizations, and these organizations are not involved in single measure network. And there are quite similar distribution of organization sizes across these two networks. Fourthly, there are higher proportion of micro enterprises involved in all different types of tasks for whole house retrofit. And there are high proportion of large organizations for all tasks in single measure. Organization performing physical installation tends to be more peripheral in whole house organizations network. And whole house network has more cohesive and more efficient diffusion of information. But information exchange concentrated amongst two brokers in whole house, and these are distributed across more organizations in single measure network. So what we are going to do next is to consolidate these findings into two research papers. One is provide some insights on why many single measure retrofit projects fail, and provide insights on if we wanted to move on to whole house retrofit projects, what how are we able to how are we able to eliminate the failure of many of the single measured retrofit projects and move beyond that. And secondly, we wanted to evaluate the roles of key actors, including because we've seen that local authorities, and there are 3 private organizations, they are the key brokerage roles, but there is limited analysis so far. So yeah, so I think that's the end of my presentation, and questions, feedback and critics, all welcomed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucia. Thank you. Could I kick off with, intuitively, I would have said that bigger companies will be involved more in whole house, which sounds to me a bigger contract, a bigger job, and the single measure retrofits, which sound like a smaller, messier contracting thing, would have been where the small companies, and particularly micro companies, would be. But you seem to say that there was the opposite of that.
It's a really, really interesting question, and I think that's one of our contributions here of the findings. So to start with the single measure, the traditional one, I think it's reasonable to assume that there are maybe small local micro enterprises involved. But in contrast, there are large organizations instead. I think this might explain that for traditional projects, the local authorities are playing a very important role. So in terms of different tasks, it seems that the local authorities are telling installers and contractors what to do. So they're playing a more important role, telling them what to do, and the smaller or micro enterprises just receive the orders and implement the job without being involved in many of the design work or planning part. So that's my assumption here. In terms of the whole house projects, because it's a very innovative approach, and the experience of the local authorities might be limited to coordinating or initiating traditional approaches. And so in terms of looking at how to combine and to integrate all of the advanced technologies, like 3D printing, or I don't know, like what other technologies, integrated smart heating meter, ventilations, these kind of thing. There tends to be more micro innovative small companies involved in just driving novel informations. Did I answer your question, Nigel?
You did answer it. That's another confusion, though. If you would kind of expect that the big companies would be the ones that are doing the whole house and would have the innovation. And the last part of your answer seemed to imply that it's the smaller companies who've got the flexibility to do the innovation. That's not. You could. I'm sure you're right. It's not what you might expect. I'm just wondering if it's the nature of the construction industry where they relentlessly outsource everything and give it to a different trade. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have a ponder on that. Thank you. So does anybody want to put their hand up to ask a question? Okay, I'll wait a bit for that. So how difficult is it to do this social network analysis, Eugenia?
I think collecting social network part, the data, collecting data using the survey part, it was relatively easy. Because it was quite a standard questionnaire. It's just a little bit different at the end because I'm asking for nominations of new organizations at the end and asking about communication frequency. And I think the most difficult part for me, at least, it was to understand the context because I don't really know about the city. It's not in Edinburgh. I can't really visit there. And and also I don't really know this what organizations are involved. And so for me it was all it was all new, so I don't really know the context, and so because I don't know about it, so it's hard for me to draft the survey. I think it would be relatively easier if you have a list of the organizations, well, a network you are aware of. So for example, if you have name list already in front of you, and then you can actually upload it to Network Canvas and ask the same questions to your participant instead of asking your participant to, okay, so you need to give me some names. And people tend to forget. And sometimes people just, maybe it's sensitive, commercially sensitive information. So they wouldn't necessarily give you the full list of the names. So if you have the names in hand already, just show it to the participant and then, okay, click this, click that, and then it's relatively easier. So yeah, I would say it's the getting the context and getting to know the people and building up the trust, telling them that this is purely for research and I wouldn't disclose your important business partners, these or who your suppliers are, these kind of information. Building that trust was quite tricky.
Good, that's a very interesting. So there's a question from Julia. Julia, are you there? Are you muted?
As I said, there's no stupid questions. You can ask me, how did you design this research? How is there any challenges I faced during the data collection process, and how did I analyze the data? I don't know, how did I use the platform? Any questions is welcomed. And maybe questions not only about this project, but maybe about questions about how you would like to use SNA. Is it going to be useful in your area, for example, in the future?
So, Julia, I see you still got your hand up and you've muted yourself now. Do you have a question you'd like to ask? Or is it a legacy hand or a mistake?
Maybe if Julia has problems with the connection, she could put the question in the chat.
Thank you, Doris. Yeah. How much maths do you need to do this method?
Well, I don't think you really need much math since you have so many useful tools at the moment. So there are different tools to do this calculation. I never do calculation myself. So one is called UCINet. It's like SPSS. So you just input all the data, and then if you want to calculate something, you just click here, click there, calculate testing hypothesis, and this is the independent variable, this is dependent variable, and what is the p-value. So there is a whole report going on. And alternatively, you can build some models which might require some coding, some coding capabilities, but it's quite there are a lot of tutorials and there are a lot of codes ready to be used, so you can just copy and paste and do some modifications. I think it's, for me, it was quite intuitive to do so, and I'm really bad at maths, even though I'm Chinese, but yeah, I'm able to do this.
There's several people I know who are doing research which kind of features where women are disadvantaged by not being engaged in the network.
Mm.
So presumably you could use something like this to map the networks and perhaps show that women were on the edges, the periphery of the network, and maybe didn't have any connections to the big players that were in the middle.
Definitely. So you can, if you can collect the data about the individuals, and then depending on also all the context, because the two important thing here is who are the nodes and what are the ties. So the nodes might be, as you said, might be individuals, and the node will have different attributes, women, men, or other gender, and also religions, so different attributes. And then connections between these individuals can also have different attributes. For example, what I did was communication about different tasks. And so maybe this can be friendship connections, or how often do you talk to this person, or how often do you have meeting or social activities with this person. And so we can do some calculations on, well, first of all, visualizations of these individuals, and see whether women are really in the peripheral, or people with different other attributes are really peripheral. And we can also test it, whether it's statistically significant, or is it just a trick by the eyes.
And to make it even harder, could it be used so in lots of areas we have people who don't take something up, people who don't apply for some government grants that they are qualified for, or possibly don't go to university, or just don't take something up. Could we use the same social network analysis for something like that?
Exactly. There are a lot of existing studies using social network analysis to understand the social capital and the implication of, for example, whether better connected people are easier to get a job, are likely to get a better job, or yeah, there are a lot of existing studies like this in organizational studies, in sociology.
Thank you. I'll give a last try for Julia. If you're still there, are you ready to ask your question?
There's Christina and another one with the question. Can we ask
also
Christina to pose the question, please?
I'm happy. I will take my turn, but I think Marina was in front on the. Thank you very much, Kanshka. Perhaps she should go first, and then I will.
I think Marina has a question.
Marina has a question in the chat, which is, how did you stumble upon SNA? Why did you think it was more beneficial than other methods? And what other research would SNA be useful for?
Wow, I think that's a big question. That's three big questions. So me personally, I'm interested in human relationships and the implication of human relationship to group performance, opportunities, constraints. I think that is the basic assumption of social network theory. So basically, the structure of a network will be opportunity and constraints, and this in turn will influence individuals that is embedded in this network. And I think it's beneficial than the other methods. I think it depends on the context. For this research, because we are interested in looking at the structure of the network. So this is a tool we're using, and we didn't really see any other alternatives to map and to measure the structure and the relationships in between the organizations. And other research would be SNA useful for, well, if you type social network analysis on Google Scholar, perhaps you can have a better view of other disciplines, because my area is limited to logistics and supply chain management and sociology. And this, well, in general, SNA is originated in sociometry and anthropology philosophy. So it's with different across different disciplines. And Nigel just now have pointed out some other potential avenues to imply SNA.
Thank you. Have we got another question from G Wall? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Julia, for the presentation. Sorry, I don't know if you've already addressed this question. I think I quickly popped out and I came back in again. So it's just a tool. I just wanted to check what tool you used for the connection mapping, the relationship mapping you did.
The visualization, do you mean?
Yeah, the visualization, yes.
Okay, so there are a lot of ways to do the visualization, and for me, I used Gephi. So it's GE. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, great, thank you.
It's free. And you can use other tools like, I don't remember, I think using R
Okay.
programming, and also using UCINet. UCINet. It's for me, because Gephi, I can manipulate it well, and you can also use this for large network like Twitter network, these kind of things. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been very patient, Christina. So it's Christina's.
Yes. The moral of the story is don't wait in the queue because it doesn't work. However, hi there. Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. My area of research is gender and networks in the professional service firms. So I recognise not necessarily the structured approach, but I recognise your way, shall we say. My question, I have two slight questions for you, really. I note the local authorities, seem to, we could say, have a competitive advantage at the moment. I wonder if you'd agree with that. Because in the traditional building industry is very subcontracted, so smaller firms, even one-man bands. So I just wondered if, one, do you have any thoughts on how things may go from here, in terms of, will the industry become consolidated by larger players, partnerships, that type of thing? And the other thing I'd like to ask you about is the building industry is also gendered. And I'm curious if you saw any players who were female. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think for your first question about local authority being very competitive in this market, I have no doubt about it. In terms of, but from this project, I see that, especially in the whole house innovative approach, although the local authorities are still playing a central role, we can also see that there are micro enterprises making good contributions and innovative inputs, which is quite absent before. So I could see as a good sign to have a more balanced, different types of actors involved in this network, in this area. And second question for gendered, so it feels like it's male dominant area. I think from my interviews, I think it seems all of the contractors were men, but you see, it's one or two representative I interviewed or giving survey with, so I couldn't say whether the rest of the people there are no women involved, and because we were investigating in organizations, so gender was not part of the attributes, but certainly it would be interesting to investigate if it's individuals. But still, I met with a few very tough women and yeah, really appreciate their work. And yeah, I don't really know if I answered that question for you, because we didn't really interviewed, or we didn't really pay attention to individuals in this study.
That's okay. I mean, thanks for answering that anyway. I was just curious as to whether, women were breaking through into that field. But as you say, I understand that wasn't necessarily part of your study. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any burning questions? I think I really interested in this social network analysis, and I'd first like to thank Akansha for setting this up, but I think we should have you back again sometime, Ujia, talking again about social networks. It's I think it's something that fits with the underlying culture of how our university at London Metropolitan wants to help those whose voices often don't get heard. It's and other things. But thank you very much indeed for coming along and giving us this insight into the work you've been doing and social network analysis.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening and giving your feedback and comments.
Thank you. Okay, so
yeah, sorry to bring this up. I think there are two more questions in the chat. I think
Julia,
Julia.
two more questions. Yeah.
There's Julia couldn't come up, and there's one more. So one of them is very clear presentation. I wonder, how do you balance your data sample collection regarding the types of organizations, example, public, private, or micro, small, medium, large? You seem to mention that number of private and local organizations. Could you please clarify the data sample?
I think I didn't really understand about data sample, because here we don't have samples. It's a whole population we're trying to collect. So
is it the number of organizations? So how many organizations did you collect the data from?
Right. So, well, let me see the number of organizations. So there are 58 organizations, 275 connections within those 58 organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Thank you, Ija. Can I jump in quickly, because I asked that question? My name is Jiang Hong.
Hi.
Hello, Ija. I just want to ask about, because I think you mentioned about there are total about 25 surveys completed.
That's right.
Because you have used the semi-structured interviews. How these surveys are complying with the number of 58 organizations that you have mentioned when you are using about social network analysis? That's my question.
Okay, that's a brilliant question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jianhong. So there are 25 surveys we did. So that's the total participant we had in completing the social network survey. But since each participant will nominate other organizations they work with, so there are more than 25 in total, and we try to reach those nominees, and some of them didn't respond. Some of them clearly refused after several rounds of chasing. So that's the final number that we have.
Okay, so after including all the nominated organizations, you ended up with active 58 organizations. That's come up with all the nodes that you have just showed us. That's the analysis part you have used. Would that also means that 25 participants who have participated in your survey questions, are these local organizations who are public organizations that are more willing to participate, in an academic relevant project, or are these somehow in nature they are not really, you have relatively less number of private organizations that are more willing to participate? Because in this case, you might have, I'm not sure about exactly how the data sample collections about the participants in your survey, but would that be able to lead into a little bit bias for your data analysis? If you have a more number of local organizations participating, less private organizations participate in the survey?
Thanks for your question. I think that's a valid question as well. I think this is something we also keen to do at the moment, for us to have some sensitivity analysis to see if there's any bias. But so far, my overall impression after the completing this survey with the participant is those who refused to participate were the subcontractors. So for example, I would ask someone who was nominated by one of my participants. I sent several emails and I make a call in the end, and then she would ask me, what is retrofit? So it's something really basic in this industry, but people just do whatever they were told to do. And it feels like, even though they were considered part of the network by my other participants, these people who refuse to participate seems to feel that they are not really in this network, or they were completing a project, but they don't necessarily know the name of the project or the nature of the project. What is it really for? So that's my overall impression. And those organizations that are really involved in this study is those organizations who are really involved in this project, or actively engaged in contributing into this project, know what is the purpose of the project, and know how to contribute to. That's my overall impression. But it's a fair question from you, and we aim to do a separate study of those 25 organizations to see what is the difference between these 25 and those 58.
Oh, thank you very much, Yudia. That's very clear. Thank you.
It is a good question, and I just get one of my big takeaways from today is that you could use social network analysis to potentially reach people that don't usually engage with academic research, certainly, or even, I remember doing a project with the library, and what the library really wanted to know is about the people who don't use the library, and that's a very hard methodological question. But if you could do it in a way that's super friendly and doesn't have to be wordy and doesn't have to use phrases like academics roll around like retrofit and things, you could do it somehow. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One of the classic question in social network analysis is, so just one professor in USA wanted to understand how people are well connected all over the world, and they thought that if I give this letter randomly to one person and I would ask him to send this letter to a totally different person in another side of the world, how many people, how many connections will, how many times will this letter be passed between different intermediaries? And the result is really surprising because it's only 5. So in general, we are all connected with each other, and it's called 6 degrees of separation. We are living in a small world, and yeah, we're, so if you, it's just so interesting.
Brilliant. On that note, we will end. Thank you ever so much. I'm sure we'll see you again. And goodbye, everyone. Nice
Bye-bye.
weekend.
Bye.